A 12-year-old black boy danced alone on the edge of a billionaire's estate. His shoes were red, worn, held together with tape. He did not know he was being watched. 60 yards away, behind a window in a private rehabilitation wing, a paralyzed girl sat frozen in a wheelchair. She had stopped speaking for a long time. She had not moved her hand for a long time. But right then, her eyes followed every step this stranger took. Then the security guards arrived. They did not ask questions. They slammed the boy face down into the grass and locked handcuffs around his wrists. The billionaire walked over. Phone already dialing the police. He looked at the boy and said 5 words. "People like you always steal." He did not know that before long he would be on his knees begging this boy to save his daughter. Yeah, nobody there realized what that moment would lead to. So let's start today's story. The Langford estate sat behind 12-foot iron gates at the end of a private road lined with oak trees older than the nation's constitution. 40 acres of manicured silence. A 22,000-square-foot main house built from imported limestone. Security cameras on every wall, every fence post, every corner where shadow met light. This was not a home. It was a kingdom. And Victor Langford had built it with his own hands. Victor was in his late 50s, founder and CEO of Langford Dynamic Systems, a defense technology firm that held contracts with 3 branches of the United States military. His face had appeared on the covers of Forbes, Bloomberg, and Wired. In his study, framed photographs showed him shaking hands with senators, generals, and 2 former presidents. He was a man who had spent decades bending the world to fit his vision. But that evening, his hands were shaking. On his desk sat a medical report, the latest in a long series. The conclusion was the same as all the others. No significant progress. His daughter, Sophie, remained paralyzed from the waist down following a car accident caused by a drunk driver. The driver walked free on a legal technicality. Victor had sued. Victor had lost. And his daughter had stopped walking, stopped talking, stopped smiling, stopped everything. He had spent $14 million. Neurologists from Berlin, physiotherapists from London, experimental stem cell researchers from Sao Paulo. Every specialist delivered the same confused verdict. Sophie's spine showed signs of partial recovery, yet her body refused to respond. The paralysis was no longer purely physical. Her mind had retreated so deep into grief that her body had followed it into silence. In the rehabilitation wing, a private facility Victor had built inside the estate, Sophie sat in her wheelchair beside the window. Her physical therapist, Rachel Bennett, adjusted the monitors and spoke to her gently. Sophie did not respond. Her eyes were fixed on the garden outside, watching nothing, seeing nothing. Rachel wrote in her notes, "Patient unresponsive to verbal and tactile stimuli." Catherine Langford, Victor's wife, stood in the doorway holding a children's book she had read to Sophie every night for a long time. She placed her hand on her daughter's cheek and whispered, "Come back to us, sweetheart." Sophie's eyes did not flicker. Catherine closed the book and walked away before her daughter could see her cry. Then there was Ray Mitchell, Victor's head of security. Ex-military, 6'3", built from concrete and contempt. Since the accident, Ray had transformed the estate into a military compound. He screened every visitor, logged every vehicle, monitored every inch of the perimeter. His loyalty to Victor was absolute. But loyalty was not the same as decency. He leaned over the security desk, watching footage of the south wall, and muttered to a junior guard, "Those New Britain kids have been creeping closer. One of them gets in here. It's on your head." New Britain. 15 miles south, the world changed completely. Cracked sidewalks, bus stops with shattered glass panels, a bodega with steel bars across its windows. One of the poorest cities in the state. and the place Darius Brooks called home. He was 12 years old, thin, quiet, and right then, he was dancing on a flattened piece of cardboard outside a laundromat. His body moved with a fluidity that did not belong to a child. Hip-hop isolations blending into contemporary flow. Sharp freezes melting into spins that seemed to bend gravity. A few neighbors watched from plastic chairs. A little girl tossed a quarter at his feet. He did not notice. When Darius danced, the world disappeared. On his feet were a pair of red dance shoes, scuffed and fading. The left toe patched twice with electrical tape. His mother, Tasha Brooks, had given them to him shortly before she died of cancer. She was 31, a backup dancer who once earned a spot at a prestigious New York company only to turn it down when she discovered she was pregnant with Darius. She worked 2 jobs, danced in her living room, and taught her son rhythm before she taught him the alphabet. The shoes were 2 sizes too big when she placed them in his hands. "You'll grow into them," she said, "and promise me never stop moving. The world will try to make you stand still. Don't let it." Now the shoes fit. Tasha had been gone for a few years. Upstairs in a 2-bedroom apartment above the laundromat, Evelyn Brooks, Darius's grandmother, a retired nurse, watched her grandson through the window. She saw Tasha in every movement he made. She whispered to herself, "He's got his mother's fire. I just pray the world doesn't put it out." $14 million against a pair of taped-together shoes. 2 worlds 15 miles apart about to collide. Darius did not plan to be there. After school one afternoon, he boarded the number 9 bus heading north with 75 cents and a vague idea. Someone at school had mentioned a park near Darien with a stone gazebo. Good acoustics, open space, a place where sound bounced off the walls in a way that made even clapping feel like music. Darius wanted to try a new routine there, something he had been building in his head for weeks. A piece about his mother, about the way she used to hum while folding laundry, the way her feet never stopped moving even when she was too tired to stand. He got off at the wrong stop. The street was quiet. Too quiet. No bodegas, no chain-link fences, no bass thumping from parked cars, just stone walls draped in ivy, ancient oak trees, and the smell of freshly cut grass so clean it almost hurt. Darius walked along the wall, trailing his fingers across the cool stone until he found a gap. Not a gate, just a place where the ivy had pulled away, and the wall dipped low enough for a 12-year-old to see over. Beyond it, a garden that looked like something from a movie. Roses in perfect rows, a fountain shaped like a lion, grass so green it seemed painted. Darius did not climb over the wall. He walked further along the perimeter until he found an open stretch of lawn near the garden's edge, technically outside the main gate, but within the property's boundary. He did not know that. He did not see the cameras. He set down his backpack. He pulled out his red shoes and laced them on. He pressed play on a small Bluetooth speaker, a second-hand gift from Evelyn, and his mother's favorite song filled the air. A slow, aching melody that Tasha used to play every Sunday morning. And Darius began to dance. The grass was soft beneath his feet. The air was warm, and for the first time in a while, something inside him unclenched. His arms rose like water finding its level. His feet tapped, then swept, then spun. He danced the hum of his mother's voice. He danced the creak of the laundromat stairs. He danced the feeling of being 12 and alone and carrying something inside him that he could not name, but could not put down. His eyes closed. The world fell away. He did not see the security camera pivot toward him. He did not see Ray Mitchell lean forward at the monitor, jaw tightening, reaching for his radio. And he did not see the 2 guards approaching from behind, silent, fast, deliberate. The first hand grabbed his shoulder and ripped him backward. The second shoved him face down into the grass. His speaker skidded across the lawn, his mother's song still playing. His chin hit dirt. His arms were wrenched behind his back so hard his shoulder made a sound. Not a crack, but a wet pop that sent fire down his left side. Before he could scream, the cold bite of steel closed around both wrists. Handcuffs on a 12-year-old boy. His red shoes had come off in the struggle. They lay on their sides in the grass, laces tangled like two small fallen birds. Ray Mitchell arrived on a golf cart shortly after. He stepped out slowly, adjusted his belt, and looked down at Darius the way a man looks at something stuck to the bottom of his shoe. He did not ask if the boy was hurt. He did not ask his name. He crouched, grabbed Darius's chin, turned his face left, then right, examining him like evidence, and said, "What did you steal? Empty your pockets. Now." The guards hauled Darius to his knees. His pockets contained a bus transfer, a house key on a frayed string, and a photograph, small, creased, laminated with packing tape, of a woman in a red dress, mid-dance, laughing at the camera. Tasha Brooks, the only picture Darius carried. Ray took the photograph, glanced at it, and tossed it onto the grass. "Nothing worth anything," he said. "Just like I expected." Darius stared at his mother's face lying in the dirt. His voice came out thin, barely a whisper. "I wasn't stealing anything. I was just dancing." Ray laughed, a short, hard sound with no humor in it. "Dancing, right? A kid from New Britain just happens to wander onto a property worth more than your whole bloodline. You were casing the place. I've seen 100 of you. 100 of you." Darius heard those words, and something inside him went very still. Not angry, not sad, still. The way water goes still before it freezes. Then Victor Langford arrived. He came from the main house, stride long and impatient, phone already in his hand. He looked at the scene, a black boy on his knees in handcuffs, guards on either side, Ray standing over him. And he did not pause. He did not ask what happened. He made his assessment right away and reached his verdict. "Call the police," he said to Ray. "Trespassing, possible attempted burglary. I want him processed and removed." Darius looked up at the billionaire. "Sir, please, I got off at the wrong bus stop. I didn't know this was—" "I don't care what your story is." Victor's voice was flat, final. The voice of a man who signs contracts that end careers. "People like you always have a story. People like you." The words landed like a hand across the face. Not shouted, not spat, delivered calmly, almost bored, which made them worse. Darius was 12 years old, kneeling in handcuffs on a stranger's lawn. And he already understood exactly what those 3 words meant. They meant his skin. They meant his neighborhood. They meant that nothing he said from this point forward would be heard, because the verdict had been delivered before he opened his mouth. Catherine Langford appeared on the terrace. She saw the boy, the handcuffs, the guards, and her voice cut across the lawn. "Victor, he is a child." Victor did not turn around. "Stay inside, Catherine." Darius stopped talking. He looked down at his mother's photograph lying face down in the grass. A tear fell from his jaw and landed on the back of his own hand. The hand locked in steel behind his back. He did not make a sound. And 60 yards away in the rehabilitation wing, something no one expected was happening. Rachel Bennett stared at her monitor and blinked. Then blinked again. Sophie's heart rate, flat and mechanical for a long time, had just spiked. Her pupils, tracked by the neural response system, were dilated and moving. Rachel checked the window angle and realized Sophie's gaze was fixed on the garden, fixed on the boy. Rachel whispered to herself, "That's unusual. What you just saw right there happens all the time. A kid getting judged before he even says a word. Not for what he did, just for how he looks. And honestly, that's messed up, because the world will decide who you are before you even open your mouth." Now, think about it like this. What if that kid was your kid? Stay with me for a second, because this next part, everything flips. Just as Ray grabbed Darius by the collar and began dragging him toward the security office, a sound came through the estate intercom that stopped every person on that lawn. A voice, thin, cracked, barely louder than a breath. "The boy! Bring the boy." Ray's hand froze. The two guards exchanged a look. Catherine pressed both hands to her mouth, and Victor turned toward the intercom speaker, as if the voice had come from the dead. Because in a way, it had. Sophie Langford had not spoken a full sentence for a very long time. Doctors had tried. Therapists had tried. Her mother had begged, read stories, played music, held her face in both hands, and pleaded. Nothing. Sophie existed behind glass, present but unreachable. And now, for the first time in a very long time, she had formed words. Rachel Bennett's voice followed through the intercom, breathless. "Mr. Langford, come up here, right now. Sophie is responding. Her vitals are—" I have never seen this. Victor did not move for a long moment. His phone was still in his hand, the police dispatcher still on the line. He stared at Darius, the boy on his knees, wrists red from the handcuffs, dirt on his face. This child from New Britain, in taped-together shoes, had somehow done what $14 million could not. He did not understand. He did not need to. "Remove the cuffs," he said quietly. Ray stared. "Sir, this kid just—" "Remove the cuffs, now." The handcuffs came off. Darius rubbed his wrists, the skin already bruising, and looked up at Victor with an expression that was not gratitude and not fear. It was the careful stillness of someone who has learned that the same hand that hurts you can change its mind without warning. They brought him upstairs, through a marble foyer, down a hallway lined with paintings worth more than his grandmother's apartment building, into the rehabilitation wing. Darius walked between Victor and Ray like a prisoner being escorted, still unsure if this was a rescue or a different kind of trap. Then he saw her. Sophie sat in a motorized wheelchair in the center of a room filled with machines. She was small, pale, her legs covered by a white blanket. Monitors beeped around her, but her eyes were wide open and locked onto Darius with an intensity that made him forget every other person in the room. "You were dancing," she said. Her voice was rough from disuse, like a hinge that had not turned in years. "Outside, by the wall. I saw you." "Yeah," Darius said. "I was." "Will you do it again?" The room held its breath. Victor stood by the door, arms crossed, a man watching something he could not control. Catherine had both hands pressed together as if in prayer. Rachel kept her eyes on the monitors. Ray leaned against the wall, suspicion carved into every line of his face. And Darius looked at this girl in her wheelchair and saw something no one else could see. He saw his mother in her final weeks, trapped in a body that had stopped listening, desperate for something to feel. His red shoes were still outside, lying in the grass. He was standing in his socks on hardwood floor. He nodded. He began to move. No music, no speaker, no cardboard stage, just his body and the silence. His arms floated upward, palms open, fingers spreading like branches reaching for light. His feet whispered across the floor. Soft taps, gentle turns, movements so quiet they barely made a sound. He did not perform. He spoke with his shoulders, his wrists, his spine in a language that had no words. And Sophie's right hand, the hand that had not moved voluntarily for a long time, lifted off the armrest. It rose 2 inches, then 3, then 5. Her fingers stretched open, reaching toward the boy dancing just for her. Rachel grabbed Victor's arm. "Mr. Langford, look at her hand." Catherine saw it and covered her face. Victor stared at his daughter's hand, suspended in the air, trembling, alive, and felt something crack open inside his chest that no amount of money had ever reached. Darius did not see any of this. His eyes were closed. He was not dancing for a billionaire's daughter. He was dancing for his mother, keeping his promise. And he had no idea that he had just changed everything. The next morning, Victor did what Victor always did. He wrote a check. He sat across from Evelyn Brooks in the estate's formal sitting room, a space designed to intimidate with 18-foot ceilings and oil portraits of men who built empires, and slid a piece of paper across the mahogany table. $5,000 a week, he said. Darius comes here every day after school, dances for Sophie, and your family is taken care of. I'll arrange transportation. Evelyn looked at the check. She did not touch it. Then she looked at Victor. Not at his suit, not at his house, not at the wealth pressing down from every wall. She looked at him directly, the way a woman looks at a man she has already measured and found short. "My grandson is not for hire, Mr. Langford." Her voice was steady, unhurried, carrying the kind of authority that doesn't need volume. "But if his gift can help your daughter, he'll do it because that's who he is, not because of your money." Victor blinked. In decades of business, no one had ever pushed a check back across his table. He opened his mouth to negotiate. It was reflex, muscle memory. But Catherine stepped in, thanked Evelyn warmly, and guided the conversation towards something resembling human decency. The arrangement was made on Evelyn's terms. Darius would come 3 times a week. Evelyn would accompany him. And there would be no contracts, no cameras, and no obligations. Victor agreed because he had no choice. For the first time in his life, he needed something that money could not purchase. The sessions began. On the first visit, Darius danced in Sophie's room with Rachel, monitoring every reading. He was nervous, self-conscious with adults watching, aware of Victor's eyes tracking him from the doorway like a man evaluating an investment. His movements were smaller than usual, held back, careful. But even restrained, something passed between him and Sophie that the machines could measure. Her eyes followed him without blinking. Her fingers twitched in rhythm with his steps. And when he finished, breathing hard, standing awkwardly in the middle of the room, Sophie spoke. "What's his name?" 3 words, a full question. The first she had asked anyone for a long time. Catherine heard it from the hallway and pressed her back against the wall, sliding down until she was sitting on the floor, crying silently into her hands. The second session, a few days later, was different. Darius brought his small Bluetooth speaker and played his mother's favorite song, the same Sunday morning melody that had been playing when the guards tackled him. This time there were no guards, just the music, the room, and Sophie watching from her wheelchair. Darius let go. His movements grew wider, deeper, pulling from somewhere below technique, from the place where grief lives when it has nowhere else to go. His arms swept through the air like he was clearing smoke from a burning room. His feet struck the floor and then floated, struck and floated, building a rhythm that felt less like choreography and more like a heartbeat made visible. Sophie's right arm lifted fully off the wheelchair, not a twitch, not a spasm, a slow, deliberate reach, her fingers stretching toward Darius as if trying to touch the music itself. Rachel nearly dropped her tablet. She checked the readings 3 times before she believed them. Neural activity in Sophie's lower motor cortex had increased dramatically during Darius's dancing. She whispered into her recorder. Mirror neuron activation paired with deep emotional resonance. No clinical protocol replicates this. The 3rd session broke everyone in the room. Darius danced a piece he had choreographed for his mother's memorial, a routine he had never performed for anyone. It began in stillness, his body curled inward, arms wrapped around himself, and then slowly unfolded like something learning to breathe again. Halfway through, Sophie's right foot moved. Not a reflex, a deliberate rhythmic tap. She was keeping time with him. Rachel shot to her feet. Catherine gasped. Victor, standing in the doorway with his arms crossed, felt his jaw loosen and his hands drop to his sides. His daughter's foot was moving. His daughter's foot was moving. Darius did not know. His eyes were closed. They were always closed. But not everyone in the estate shared this wonder. Ray Mitchell watched the sessions from the security feed in his office and saw something entirely different. He saw a con artist, a street kid from New Britain, who had stumbled into the greatest payday of his life. He cornered Victor after the 3rd session and spoke in the low, certain voice of a man who believes suspicion is the same thing as wisdom. This kid's family is planning something, a lawsuit, a media play. They'll milk you for everything. I've seen this play before. Different kid, same hustle. Victor hesitated. He did not dismiss Ray. Some part of him, the part that built an empire by trusting no one, still listened. Ray took that hesitation as permission. He launched his own quiet campaign against Darius. On one visit, Darius arrived at the estate to find the visitor gate locked and no one answering the intercom. He waited a long time in the heat before a junior guard finally let him in. On another visit, his temporary access badge had been deactivated due to a system error. On yet another, he spent the afternoon at the estate and was not offered food or water. The kitchen staff had been told by Ray that outside visitors were not permitted in service areas, small cruelties designed not to leave marks but to send a message. You do not belong here. Darius said nothing. He came, he danced, he left. But Evelyn noticed. Her grandson was coming home thinner, quieter, with a tightness around his eyes that she recognized. It was the same look Tasha had when the dance world told her she was not the right fit, not the right look, not the right color. Evelyn called Catherine directly. Catherine investigated. She pulled the security logs, checked the access records, and found every one of Ray's fingerprints. She confronted him in the main hallway with Victor present. I'm protecting this family, Ray said, shoulders squared, chin raised. Catherine's voice was ice. You're protecting your prejudice. There's a difference. Victor stood between them, silent, torn. He knew Catherine was right, but firing Ray meant admitting that the man he had trusted for a decade shared the same blind spot that Victor himself was only beginning to see in the mirror. He told Ray to stand down. He did not fire him. And Darius kept coming, kept dancing, kept giving pieces of himself to a girl who was slowly, painfully, beautifully learning to reach back. But he now walked the hallways of the Langford estate knowing the truth, that half this household saw him as a healer, and the other half saw him as a threat. And the man at the top had not yet decided which side he was on. After compiling data from multiple sessions and hours of footage, Rachel Bennett had never compiled a case study with trembling hands, but she was trembling now. She stood in the estate's conference room before a screen showing a video call with two of the most respected minds in American medicine, Dr. Michael Hargrove from Harvard's Neurology Department and Dr. Elizabeth Thornton from Johns Hopkins Rehabilitation Medicine. Victor sat at the head of the table. Catherine sat beside him. Rachel began with the brain scans side by side. Sophie's neural activity before Darius and during. The difference was staggering. The before scans showed a motor cortex in near dormancy, gray and quiet. The during scans lit up like a city at night, firing across regions silent for a long time. Then she played the footage. Session 1, fingers twitching. Session 2, arm lifting, reaching. Session 3, foot tapping in rhythm. And a clip from a later session, Sophie's left hand, the weaker hand, the one that had shown zero response to every clinical stimulus for a long time, slowly closing around the armrest and squeezing. Dr. Hargrove spoke first. In 30 years, I have never seen a non-pharmacological stimulus produce this level of motor cortex reactivation in a trauma-induced paralysis patient. Dr. Thornton leaned closer to her camera. The mechanism is kinesthetic empathy therapy. His movement triggers mirror neuron activation that bypasses Sophie's cognitive trauma barriers. Her paralysis was never purely spinal. It was her brain's response to psychological devastation. This child's dancing is the first stimulus that has reached past the wall her mind built. She paused. The emotional depth required to produce this effect is extraordinary. This is not just dancing. This boy communicates something Sophie's brain recognizes as safe enough to respond to. That is exceptionally rare. Victor stared at the screen. $14 million, 11 specialists, and a 12-year-old in taped shoes had surpassed them all. Not with science, but with something no machine could map. That evening, the second revelation came. Catherine sat with Evelyn in the kitchen. Not the formal dining room, but the kitchen because Evelyn trusted people more when they were near a stove. Over coffee, Evelyn told the full story. Tasha Brooks was not just a woman who liked to dance. At 22, she had auditioned for one of the most prestigious contemporary dance companies in New York and been accepted. The call she had waited her entire life for. 2 days later, she discovered she was pregnant. She turned it down without hesitation. She worked 2 jobs, waitress by morning, grocery clerk by night, and danced in her living room with Darius on her hip. She taught him rhythm before he understood language. When cancer came, it moved fast. In her last weeks, Tasha could barely stand, but she sat on the edge of her bed, watched Darius dance in the hallway, and told him, "Dancing is how you tell God the things you can't say out loud. Promise me you'll never stop." Evelyn pulled out her phone and showed Catherine a video. Tasha in a red dress, dancing with 5-year-old Darius in their tiny living room. The same fluidity, the same grace, the same ability to make movement feel like language. Catherine watched it 3 times and did not realize she was crying until her tears hit the screen. When Victor saw the video that night, he stood alone in his study and watched it on repeat. This single mother who gave up her dream so her son could live. And he thought about what he had said to her child on his lawn. People like you. He pressed his palms against his desk and lowered his head. The shame did not arrive like thunder. It arrived like a tide, slow, rising, impossible to outrun. This boy was not a street kid who got lucky. He was the inheritor of a legacy, a prodigy carrying a dead woman's promise in a pair of red shoes. And Victor Langford had put him in handcuffs. After a few more sessions, Sophie had spoken more words than she had for a long time combined. Her right arm moved freely. Her left hand could grip. Both feet responded to rhythm. Rachel's reports read like dispatches from the impossible. And Victor Langford, drunk on a hope he had not felt for a long time, made the worst decision of his life. He called a press conference. He invited 12 media outlets, 4 medical journalists, and 2 network cameras to the estate. The rehabilitation wing's main room was cleared, polished, and lit with professional lighting. A performance space was arranged in the center. Hardwood floor buffed to a shine. Sophie's wheelchair positioned at the front. Victor rehearsed his talking points that morning. The narrative was already written. The devoted billionaire father who never gave up, who searched the world, who found the answer, his story. He did not tell Darius. He did not ask Evelyn. He did not consult Catherine. When Darius arrived, he walked through the front door and stopped. Cameras everywhere, reporters adjusting microphones, a woman positioning a ring light, a man testing a boom mic near the ceiling, the quiet, sacred space where he danced for Sophie. The room where 2 children had built something fragile and real had been transformed into a television set. Victor appeared beside him, hand on his shoulder. Just do what you always do. Dance for Sophie. Pretend the cameras aren't here. Darius stared at the room. He looked at the cameras and saw the same world that had ignored his mother her entire life. The same world that tackled him on the grass. The same world that handcuffed a 12-year-old and tossed his dead mother's photograph in the dirt. Now that world wanted to watch him perform. Not because they valued him, but because a billionaire decided the story was worth selling. No. The word was quiet, but absolute. Victor blinked as if the boy had spoken a foreign language. What do you mean, no? Sophie needs this. Sophie needs me. She doesn't need them. Darius pointed at the cameras. What I do with her is not a show. It's not yours to sell. Victor leaned down, voice sharpening. You're a kid from New Britain. I'm offering you the chance of a lifetime. Do you understand what this exposure could do for you? Darius held his gaze. I didn't dance my way into your daughter's heart so you could sell tickets to it. Every reporter heard it. Every camera froze. Victor straightened, his face cycling through confusion, anger, and something unfamiliar. The sting of being seen clearly by a child who owed him nothing. Darius turned and walked toward the door. Sophie, wheeled into the room by Rachel, saw him leaving. The boy whose movement had reached through the wall her mind had built. She watched him walk away and something inside her cracked open. She screamed not a word. A raw, guttural cry from the place her silence had lived for a long time. Monitors spiked into red. Rachel rushed to her. Catherine ran from the hallway. The press conference collapsed into chaos. Reporters scrambling, equipment crashing, producers shouting into phones. Outside, Ray Mitchell stepped into Darius's path at the gate after weeks of watching a street kid receive treatment he believed was undeserved. After weeks of biting his tongue while Catherine overruled him, now the kid was walking out. And Ray delivered the verdict he had carried since day one. You finally showed your true colors, kid. You were never here for the girl. It was always a hustle. That's all people like you know how to do. People like you. The same 3 words, different mouth, same poison. Ray grabbed Darius's arm hard enough to leave marks. His red shoes tumbled from his backpack onto the driveway, landing on their sides, laces splayed, the same way they had fallen on the grass weeks earlier. Evelyn was out of the car before the shoes touched ground. She put herself between Ray and her grandson and looked up at him with zero fear. Touch my grandchild again, and you will learn what it means to cross a Brooks woman. Ray released his grip. Evelyn wrapped Darius in her arms, picked up his shoes, and walked him to the car without once looking back. They drove home in silence, Darius held his mother's shoes against his chest, staring out the window. Evelyn watched him in the rearview mirror and recognized the expression. The same look Tasha wore the day she turned down New York. Someone who gave a piece of their soul to the world and watched the world try to auction it. That night, Sophie collapsed. Without Darius, neural stimulation ceased. Motor function regressed within hours. She retreated behind the wall deeper than before. Rachel called Victor late that evening. That boy was not a treatment. He was a connection. You cannot manufacture that. You cannot buy it, and you cannot put it on television. Catherine was waiting in their bedroom. The argument was quiet, which made it devastate more completely. She said what he had always known, but never faced. You didn't do this for Sophie. You did it for yourself. Because you needed to be the one who saved her. And when a 12-year-old from New Britain did what your billions couldn't, you couldn't bear it. You would rather let your pride destroy this miracle than admit a boy in taped shoes is the one person on earth who can reach your daughter. Victor sat alone in his study late that night. He pulled up security footage from weeks earlier and watched a boy in red shoes dance on his lawn with closed eyes. More grace in that small body than anything his fortune had ever built. Then he watched his guards tackle that boy, heard his own voice. People like you. He rewound it and listened again and again. Each time the words sounded uglier. Each time the boy on the screen looked smaller. The fortress Victor had spent his life building folded inward silently like a man lowering his head into his hands and letting his shoulders shake in the dark. The next morning he drove to New Britain alone. No security, no driver. Found the laundromat, climbed the narrow stairs, and knocked on Evelyn Brooks's door. She opened it and saw a billionaire in a wrinkled shirt, unshaved, eyes red and hollow. He did not say, "I'll increase the offer." He said, "I was wrong about your grandson. I was wrong about everything." Evelyn studied him for a long moment. Then, "It's not me you need to say that to." Darius appeared behind his grandmother wearing his red shoes. He had heard every word through the thin apartment walls. Victor lowered himself to one knee. A billionaire kneeling on cracked linoleum in a New Britain hallway, and looked the boy in the eye. "I didn't see you, Darius. I looked at you and saw what I wanted to see, not who you are. That was the cruelest thing I've ever done. Can you forgive me?" Darius was quiet for a long time. Then he asked one question. "Is Sophie okay?" Not, "Will you pay me?" Not, "Will you apologize publicly?" Is Sophie okay? Because his heart was never anywhere else. They returned to the estate. No cameras, no reporters, just Sophie's room. A chair for Evelyn. An open floor. He laced his red shoes. He looked at Sophie, slumped in her wheelchair, nearly catatonic. Further away than she had been in weeks. He took one breath, closed his eyes, and he danced. It began with just his hands, moving like water over stone. Then his arms, sweeping wide enough to hold everything he had ever lost. His feet found the floor, soft taps building to precise strikes. Then full spins that turned grief into geometry. He danced his mother's lullaby. He danced the sound of the laundromat at night. He danced the handcuffs in the wet grass. He danced the words that cut him. Then he danced forgiveness, slow, open, terrifying in its generosity. Sophie's foot moved, her ankle. Her knee lifted from the chair. Rachel pressed both hands over her mouth. Catherine gripped Victor's arm until her knuckles turned white. The monitors erupted. motor cortex firing on every channel, every pathway that had been dark for a long time blazing back to life. Darius opened his eyes and extended his hand. Sophie reached out. Their fingers touched, and Sophie Langford, with Darius Brooks's hand in hers, stood up from her wheelchair. 1 step, 2, 3, walking, unsteady, trembling, but alive, toward the boy who had never stopped moving, just as his mother told him. Tears streamed down Darius's face, down Sophie's face, down every face in the room. Victor Langford dropped to his knees for the second time that day, but this time he was not apologizing. He was watching his daughter walk. In the silence that followed, no one moved. Sophie stood between her wheelchair and Darius, her hand still in his, her legs trembling beneath her. She had taken 6 steps before her knees buckled and Darius caught her, holding her the way you hold something that might shatter if you breathe too hard. Rachel eased Sophie back into her chair, but Sophie did not let go of Darius's hand. Then she smiled. Small, uncertain, like a light flickering on in a house that has been dark for years. But real. Catherine pressed her face into Victor's shoulder. Evelyn closed her eyes and whispered a name only she could hear. Rachel called Dr. Hargrove and Dr. Thornton within the hour. The footage of Sophie walking 6 unassisted steps was reviewed by both specialists before nightfall. The verdict was unanimous. Darius's kinesthetic empathy therapy had achieved what $14 million in conventional treatment could not. That evening, Victor called Ray Mitchell to his study. Ray walked in expecting another assignment. He found Victor standing behind his desk with an expression he had never seen. Not anger, but a terrible, quiet clarity. "You're done, Ray." "Sir, everything I did was to protect—" "You were supposed to protect my family. Instead, you threatened the one person who saved them. You locked a child out of my gate. You took food from a boy's mouth. You threw his dead mother's photograph in the dirt." Victor paused. "Loyalty without decency is just cruelty with a badge. Leave now." Ray turned and walked out. Shortly after, he was escorted off the property carrying his belongings in a cardboard box. The same material Darius once danced on outside a laundromat in New Britain. That night, Victor sat with Darius on the terrace. The garden where Darius had first been tackled stretched out before them in the moonlight. 2 people who should have had nothing in common sharing silence. "Where did you learn to dance like that?" Darius looked down at his red shoes. "My mom. She said the body remembers what the mind forgets." Victor nodded slowly. "Your mother was right." They sat there for a long time saying nothing more, watching the garden where everything had begun. A few months later, the world looked different. Victor Langford stood at a podium in New Britain. Not in a wealthy suburb, not in Manhattan, New Britain. 1 block from the laundromat where Darius grew up, a red ribbon stretched across the entrance of a renovated community center. The sign above the door read, "The Tasha Brooks Foundation for Dance Therapy," not the Langford Foundation. Tasha Brooks, the woman who turned down New York, danced in her living room, and planted a gift in her son so deep that not even death could pull it out. Victor insisted on the name. It was the least he could do. He knew it would never be enough. The foundation would fund research into kinesthetic empathy therapy, provide dance scholarships for underserved youth, and build a bridge between medicine and the art that had done what medicine could not. Its first class of 12 students, kids from New Britain, New Haven, and Hartford, would train in a studio with sprung hardwood floors, mirrors on every wall. and a sound system that made music feel like it lived inside your bones. The kind of room Tasha Brooks never had. Evelyn stood in the audience holding an envelope she had received that morning, an acceptance letter from the most prestigious performing arts academy in the Northeast. Full scholarship, all expenses, addressed to Darius Brooks. She had read it 4 times. Each time she held it to her chest and whispered to the ceiling, "He did it, Tasha. Your boy did it." Darius's story went viral, but not from Victor's press conference. That footage was never aired. It was Rachel Bennett's published medical case study that caught fire. Co-authored with Dr. Hargrove and Dr. Thornton, it documented every session, every brain scan, every response. The video of Sophie walking during Darius's final dance was viewed 80 million times within a week, the most repeated comment in dozens of languages. This boy healed her with his soul. Twice a week, Darius returned to the estate, not as a visitor, but as Sophie's friend. She no longer sat frozen. She stood. She walked. And slowly, beautifully, she began to dance. One afternoon in early autumn, they danced together in the garden where Darius had first been tackled and handcuffed. Sophie wore white ballet shoes. Darius wore his red ones. The grass was the same. Everything else had changed. Her movements were small and cautious, her balance still fragile. But she was moving under her own power. And she was laughing. She stopped mid-step and looked at him. "You woke me up," she said. Darius shook his head. "Nah, you were always awake. You just needed someone to hear you." In a television studio, Victor sat across from an interviewer and did not deflect. He looked directly into the camera. "I handcuffed a 12-year-old boy on my lawn because of the color of his skin. That boy saved my daughter's life with nothing but a pair of old shoes and a promise to his dying mother. I don't deserve his forgiveness, but I'm spending the rest of my life trying to earn it." And Ray Mitchell? Private security at a strip mall outside Hartford. $12 an hour, a polyester uniform. One evening on his break, he walked past a food court television showing Darius and Sophie dancing together in the garden. 80 million views. The boy he had called a hustler, a thief, a nothing. Ray watched for 10 seconds, then turned and walked away. No change. No revelation. No redemption. Some people see the light and choose to close their eyes. So let me ask you something. How many Darius Brookses are out there right now? How many kids are dancing on sidewalks, singing in stairwells, painting on cardboard boxes, carrying gifts the world refuses to see because it has already decided who they are? How many miracles are we walking past every single day? This story is not about a billionaire. It is about a boy in red shoes who kept a promise to his dying mother and gave a stranger's daughter her legs back. It is about what happens when we stop looking at the outside and start seeing what is inside. Darius Brooks did not have money, connections, or a single person in power who believed in him. He had rhythm. He had heart. He had shoes held together with tape and a love so deep it could wake the dead. The lesson is simple. The people we dismiss may carry exactly the gift we need most. The child we handcuff may be the one who heals us. The talent we overlook because it comes in the wrong skin, from the wrong neighborhood, in the wrong shoes. That talent does not disappear. It waits. And when someone finally has the courage to see it, it changes everything. All right. Now hold up a second. This right here, I swear, you see this all the time. A black kid with real talent, like actually gifted, and people still act like he's not even there, just because of how he looks. And I'm gonna be real. That part always pisses me off a little. Because talent doesn't care about people's bias. It's still gonna show up. And the crazy part? Half the time, the same kid everyone ignored at the start ends up being the one who saves the whole situation later. In the end, this story leaves us with a truth that hits straight to the heart. The people we're quickest to judge often carry the exact miracle we desperately need. A boy in taped-up red shoes dismissed and handcuffed simply because of where he came from and the color of his skin turned out to be the only one who could reach a silent, broken little girl when millions of dollars and the best doctors in the world could not. His dancing wasn't just movement. It was love, memory, and unbreakable promise poured into every step. It reminded us that real healing doesn't always come from science or wealth. Sometimes it arrives in the most unexpected package, wrapped in quiet courage and the kind of grace the world tries to overlook. Darius didn't have money or connections, but he had something far more powerful, a heart that refused to stop moving, even when the world tried to make him stand still. That's the lesson we all need to carry. Never be so quick to label someone based on how they look or where they live, because the gift they're holding might be the very thing that brings someone back to life. So the next time you see a kid dancing on the sidewalk, a dreamer from the wrong neighborhood, or anyone the world has already written off, pause, really look. You might be standing in the presence of someone who could change everything. If this story touched you the way it touched me, if it made your chest tighten when that boy was slammed to the grass, and your eyes fill when little Sophie took her first steps, drop a comment below and tell me, who in your life has a hidden gift the world hasn't seen yet? Share this with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you want more stories that remind us what really matters, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Never stop moving, friends. See you in the next one.